Do know that not all inspections you can get on a property are created equal. In this week's real estate market update for Wright County and the Twin Cities, we're going to cover that and, of course, the data at large. Just real quick introduction. I'm Erica Carlson. I'm with Bricks Real Estate, which is a boutique brokerage in the Twin Cities. I help people all over the metro, but I do specialize in the Western metro side. If you learn anything new today, I'd love for you to join my growing channels. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you have any questions during this video or you want to get started, I hope you'll check out the link below where you can get a market report for your neighborhood or set up a time so we can get started. So without further ado, let's dive into the inspection conversation. So if you look at a purchase agreement, and I know that this isn't the sexiest, most exciting topic, but it is something that could make a difference for you if you find yourself in multiple offers, or maybe like you're sort of on the edge of how you feel about inspection. So maybe before I start, I'll just say, as a professional real estate agent, I'm always going to tell you to get an inspection when I'm your buyer's agent. There's no reason to skip it. When you're talking about a couple $100s, I mean, whether you're spending 200, 500, $1 million on this house, that is such a small chunk of money where it gives you the leverage to walk away from the purchase completely, renegotiate some terms. I mean, I just don't see why you would want to skip it, even if you decide not to get a professional inspection. There's a lot more to the nuances of how that all works, but for the sake of this conversation, we're just going to try to keep it really simple since, I'm not sitting here talking to you about a particular property that you're purchasing. So let's say you've made the decision that you are going to get an inspection, but you also know you have some competition, whether it's one other party or a handful of other parties. You may say, I don't want to give up your inspection, and you shouldn't feel like you have to. There's sort of a gray zone in inspections that we can sort of uncover and unpack. And there might be other real estate agents with other ideas. I'm just telling you one that comes to mind, which is called the pass-fail inspection. And it tends to confuse people when they're first presented with the idea. And there is not always a time and a place for this. You have to read the room. Now, you may do a pass-fail inspection just because it's your preference, which is perfectly fine. You may want to do a pass fail because you're in this competitive situation that I'm talking about. The other thing I want to point out is that you want to check in before you use it. You don't want to be presumptive that this is better than a traditional inspection. And we can talk about that more, but let me first explain what it is, and then we can talk about the whys and hows. So pass and fail is like very strong language, right? Like we think about school and we think about passing a class or failing a class, and like there's nothing in between. Like that would be a pretty harsh class. And that is not how inspections work. Like I hear people say, these lingo, like I don't know what they're talking about. Like, will it pass the inspection? Like you are getting the inspection for you. Let's just start with that. So the only person that can say there's a pass or a fail is you. And that's where this is confusing, because it's not like the inspector is going to come to you and say, this house failed. Like they would never talk to you that way. That isn't what their perspective is. So when we put pass fail on the contract, that's something we're willing to do to sweeten our offer, right? This is supposed to be a benefit to the seller, is I'm telling you that I am telling you it's either a full pass, like I will move forward and purchase the house, or it's a full fail, meaning it's got too many projects. I'm not going to ask you to fix anything. I'm not going to ask you to reduce the price. I am simply walking away. And I'm not necessarily even going to tell you what's wrong. So if you're just thinking for a moment about this from the point of view of a seller, that is why it's not necessarily always a move that's going to get you the deal. There will definitely be people who are going to say, hold on, what? Like, you're not even going to tell me what's wrong. I'm not going to have a chance to make this right. Like, you're just going to walk away from me. So I think like that's why it's really important that either the agent reaches out to the other agent and says, hey, if we put this in the contract, will your seller like it? Will they appreciate this nuance, or will they be sort of put off by it and wonder like why it seems so harsh? That isn't the point of it. Like when people interpret it that way, they tend to like sort of make it like it's not like people like just vanish because of that, but that is how it can be perceived. Like either it's a yes or it's a no, and like you can't get me back. Like I've gone too far. You can't convince me otherwise. No, it's not like that. So again, pass fail is you, the buyer. There's no inspector that's going to tell you it's good enough or it's not good enough. You're setting the standard, and it's just taking the gray out. Like I'm not coming back. I'm not asking for these things. I hope that that makes sense because this is hard to talk about like in a sound bite, okay? Now, another thing you should know if you've never purchased a house before is an inspection is typically written, and it doesn't have to be, and that's why we're talking about this today, that, I have so many days to get my inspection done. I can inspect as deeply or as shallowly is that a word? As I want. And so what do we mean by that? Well, typically people will just do like what's called like a whole house inspection, but you can go deeper. Like let's say you have a fireplace, you could inspect that. Do you want to test for the radon? You can do that. You can test, or not test, I should say, you can scope the sewer lines and see if there's any tree roots or issues in the sewer lines. If you want to go, if you want to literally deep dive into the ground, you can go do that during this period. And I'm sure there's other things, like I don't mean to like brush over anything. Like we don't live in a state where people test for termites. So like if you're coming here from another state, like that's not typical in Minnesota. But if there's some, something along those lines, like it's really up to you, like how deep you want to go with your inspection. It might be how much money you want to spend, but also I think like what people need to always do is like check in with themselves. Like how much information is important to you? What are you going to do with that information? What sellers get upset about is that this information is gathered and then they feel like it's leveraged against them. So they feel like they've given you a fair price, let's just say, or a good deal, or maybe they're helping you pay for closing costs. You get an inspection and now you ask for more. And sometimes that's why it doesn't land very well with sellers. If they feel like they've already given, sometimes asking for more to keep the deal together is, for some people, it's asking too much. Now, those of us in the business, I don't think we feel as strongly. It's not emotional, but for you have to remember for a lot of people selling a personal house, it does feel like a lot. If it's raising issues they didn't know exist or they're not having problems with, and you're now saying it's a flat out deal breaker, it's also just super important to know that like what you're asking for is appropriate. Like, you know, that's so judgmental, but what I mean by that is like, for example, I've had people say they want plumbing up to code. Okay, well, something not being up to code, is that pertinent? Is it like affecting your enjoyment of the property? Is like something not going to work because it's not up to current building codes? Because if the house is 125 years old, lots of things are not going to be up to current standards. And so it's understanding, is the request something the seller can afford to do, can do? And here's the other thing. When we get our inspection results, we don't have to necessarily ask people to fix all the things. And so when we're asking for repairs, is that what we really want? Or would we prefer that to be a credit? And again, have we already asked for a lot? Is there more left to ask for? If I haven't asked for anything, maybe it is completely fine. So getting back to the contract, you have a certain amount of days to get your inspection done. You can make your inspection fully contingent on the results. That doesn't mean you're asking for anything, but you can say, I have the right to walk away. You can actually just get an inspection and not make it contingent. A lot of people don't choose that option, but because they don't see any reason of picking that. But let's say you're just getting the inspection results for yourself and there's nothing that could come up on this report that's going to change your mind, then a stronger offer would be to tell the seller, I'm getting an inspection. It is solely for me. You have nothing to stress about. And then one last thing I'll say about inspections is there's one other, we'll say, gray zone other than pass fail. Pass fail isn't a super popular way of negotiating in inspections. But it does, like, a lot of people just really like it because they like the ability to walk away, but they also like telling the seller they're not going to ask for anything. There's one other, and I don't think there's a name for it, but it's like telling the seller up to a certain amount or under a certain amount, that's all I'll ask you for, like if there's issues. So what they're doing is they're promising. It's kind of like pass fail, but it's not so black and white. So it's like saying, I'm not going to pick apart every little thing. However, if it's a very large ticket item, let's say over five, 10, $8,000, whatever dollar amount you want to associate it to it, at that point, I am going to say something and I might ask you to help me pay for it, fix it, give me compensation of some sort. It's kind of just like a way of saying I'm not going to nickel and dime you because that is what sellers are looking for. Like that is their fear is you're going to have this laundry list of repair items that maybe they don't have the means to take care of. They don't have the money. I mean, just think about it. Like, honestly, right now, if I said you had a bunch of work to do on your house, like right now, would you be super excited to go do that, let alone just to get your property sold? Not really. So it's something to think about whether you're on the buy or sell side. And I hope the idea of pass fail inspires you or makes you think about inspections differently. I'm not really recommending it. It's just another tool in your toolbox. So we are going to move over to the data. And then, like I said, we will then look at the deal of the week. We've got the Twin Cities and Wright County. I do hope this has been helpful. And we're at 2.98 in terms of our bricks meter, which is a way of telling you that we're in a buyer's market. That's what's important for you to know. I expect we will continue to be on this path for the next few weeks until the end of the holidays, and then we will see a change probably after Christmas, to be quite blunt. Inventory continues to be up over last year. You can see 6.4%. Interest rate continues to hover around 7%, which is a little bit lower than last week. And then average days on market for the whole Twin Cities is 38. So let's look at Wright County. Give me just a moment. All right, hopefully you are seeing my screen. I'm going to answer two big questions you might have about the Wright County area, which is my price of my property going up or down? And we're going to answer that in a general way. And then also, if I was going to put my house on the market right now, how long would it take? So let's start with the numbers conversation. And to make this a little bit easier to understand, I have 3 years worth of data on the screen. Now, I did remove new construction. I didn't have to, but I just think that that's probably a better place for most people to be in because assuming even if you're interested in new construction, you're not selling it. So I just figured I would remove that. So if we look at 2022 on the screen, most of us know if you're paying any attention to the news, that was an extremely hot year in real estate. It was a severe seller's market. We'll look at data just in just a moment here to support that. And the average price in Wright County was 378, right? So that's not any particular property. Today it's 401. And I think that that surprises a lot of people for various reasons. We have home insurance going up right now, a lot of conversation around that topic. We have a lot of conversation about our proposed 2025 taxes. And the problem when we look at insurance and we look at taxes is these are different evaluations of how they look at our property value, right? No, I'm not an insurance person. It is my understanding that when you are told that they think your house is valued a certain amount on the insurance, it's more based on like if I had to completely rebuild this property from scratch. And so you're going to see, I would assume, a very different number. And then in terms of taxes, I think that there's a lot of equations going into that I don't think I pretend to fully understand. But again, it's not resale value. So while I would think most real estate agents look at that number out of curiosity, just to get like a sense of things, the problem is what kind of market are we in? Are we in a buyer's market? Well, then frankly, your property tax amount might be a little too high. If we're in a seller's market, it might be a little bit low. And we can put some generic percentages on that. I don't know that that helps you understand or make decisions any bit better. And of course, that's why people peek onto things like Zillow and Realtor.com and in different websites, which are algorithms, and they give you a sense, of these things. And so the other thing I can share with you is a neighborhood market report. I've talked about this many times. I offer it every week. It's a no strings attached. It's free. And if you're really uncomfortable giving me your address, we can do it by city. You could give me a generic address point, like, the local grocery store, if it's nearby or something where we could still give you an idea of some numbers and things. So anyway, I digress. So you can see in a marketable value, not insurance, not property taxes, we're seeing it go from 378 up to 401. 5.3% increase. So that's interesting. The numbers just keep going up. And let's switch over to, okay, so if it took how long would it take if I were to sell this house? In theory, again, we're not talking about any particular house in Wright County, so please take this with a grain of salt. On average, it would take 43 days right now, which is about, a month and a half, right? So it could be worse, it could be better. When we go back to 2022, notice it was 22 days on market. So it was much more of a seller's market. We are in a buyer's market right now. I'm actually not, I mean, I just don't think a month and a half is actually that long as you're prepared that, this house probably isn't going to sell the first weekend. It's not necessarily going to go into multiple offers. That's okay. You need one great buyer. That's what you're looking for. You don't need 20 offers. It's not a vanity metrics of how great my house is. It should be about meeting your goal of selling in a certain amount of time for a certain amount of money, I would assume. So that's pretty generic. Again, if you're on waterfront acreage, if the house needs a lot of work, where is it priced at? Because obviously the more expensive a house is, less people can afford it. So a house at 300,000 is probably going to sell faster than a house at 900,000. So now let's talk about the deal of the week. If this is something that you're interested in, please stay tuned. So here's my Twin Cities deal of the week. It's in St. Michael. And before I read this to you, feel free to pause it. You certainly don't have to listen to me read this. But if you are interested, reach out by text, call, email, like whatever is best for you, and we can talk about further details. So this is a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, 3-car garage property. I believe it's 2 stories, and it's a larger house. It's about little over 3,000 square feet. And there's some updates to it, but really what jumped out to me is at that $500,000 price point, they have recently reduced it $45,000. I actually think this one is underpriced at this point, and that is what I'm looking for when I'm shopping for a deal of the week for you. I want to find something that I think that truly is like a good deal if you were to pick it up. And so, I might not always find one that's the best for you, but I certainly, hope you will reach out if you're curious about this one. And there is always a chance it'll sell by the time you reach out. So these are legitimate deals, but like I can't control the market, obviously. So if you made it to the end with me, I appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving, and I will do my best to see you next Wednesday.